Good afternoon, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order, and we'll begin with the land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge that the ground on which we live is the traditional territory of Caldwell First Nation, of the Three Fires Confederacy, and the original people of Point Pelee and Pelee Island, and its surrounding lands and waters, and that of the Huron-Wendat and Wyandot peoples. We recognize and respect the First Nations who are stewards of the land and waters of Turtle Island and who have embraced this stewardship since time immemorial. We would also like to acknowledge contributions of other nearby First Nation communities and all original people across Turtle Island. If we can get an adoption of our agenda for April 8th, 2025 public planning meeting. Moved by Councillor Riccio Spagnolo, support by Councillor Burns. All in favor? And that carries. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest? There being none. So we'll move into the purpose of the meeting. So the Planning and Development Department of the Town of LaSalle is in receipt of an application for a zoning bylaw amendment submitted by Jinhu Holdings Incorporated, care of Jinhu, seeking to rezone the Waterfront Development 2 Zone, W2, to a site-specific Waterfront Development Zone, W2XX, to remove the required angular plane provision, to permit the construction of a 2-story townhouse and maintain a 1.2 meter setback from the property line with 130 Vermont Street. Reports PD 12-2025, which is dated March 14th, 2025, contained here and has been prepared to provide the public with pertinent information as to the specifics of the application during the statutory public planning meeting. So, item 1 for our public planning meeting for zoning bylaw amendment, file Z02-2025 for 371 Front Road. We'll start with a presentation from Ms. Lassaline.
Good afternoon, Council. If I could have. Thank you. Next slide, please. So my client is requesting a site-specific zoning bylaw amendment to continue to apply the W2 residential regulations while removing the angular plane provision. Next slide, please. Subject property is located at the corner of Vermont and Front Road. Next slide, please. You can see the zoning map. The subject property is within the Waterfront District W2 zone. The neighborhood is a mix of uses and heights, particularly along Front Road. There is a very mix of use of commercial and existing residential, where Vermont consists mainly of single detached with 1 and 2 stories. Next slide, please. The site is vacant and is a gateway property into the Vermont neighborhood. Next slide, please. So proposed are 2 blocks, each of 4 residential townhouse units for a total of 8 residential units. Next slide, please. Now, this shows the angular plane, and I'm going to read the definition briefly. Basically, it's a flat surface extending from the lot line and projecting over the property at a specified angle, measured up from the horizontal, through which no part of the structure may penetrate. So the angular plane is to be measured at a point from the grade identified on the property, and then 45-degree angle upwards. So the angular plane is the only provision that we're asking for as an exception tonight. All other provisions of the W2 zone will apply and are in compliance. Proposed is a 2-story with the maximum height of the 3.25 meters. This will be maintained. Maximum lot coverage is permitted at 30%. It will be maintained. 8 parking spaces are required for the 8 units. That's going to be maintained, and potentially 2 more parking spaces will be provided for visitor parking on the site. The site-specific provision to remove the angular plane as part of the bylaw will recognize the remaining control of height and massing of the proposed residential building will be effectively addressed through the height provision of the 3.25 meters and the lot coverage of 30%. Next slide, please. So the maximum height of 3.25 will allow for a 2-story residence similar in style to other two-story residences presently along Vermont Road. As shown, it's my professional opinion that the buildings will be distance separated. There'll be no negative impact on the adjacent property or resident as a result of the removal of the angular plane. Next slide, please. The applicants have done a shadow study. It was provided in my planning report. And the shadow study shows that in the morning, there's basically no shadow presented from the proposed buildings. In the afternoon, there's no, next slide, please. There's no shadow being presented as well. Next slide, please. There is a little bit of a shadow in the sunset hours that will be small. However, as you can see, there'll be very little to no impact on the neighbor, and the distance separation will provide for there being no negative impact. So, next slide, please. In conclusion, the angular plane regulation was provided in the W2 zone to ensure compatibility of new structures within an existing residential neighborhood. The new building does not provide for oversized height and massing. So the existing W2 bylaw allows for the maximum two-story building with a maximum of 3.25 meters height, which is what the building is proposed at. This is consistent in massing and height, and the 30% lot coverage will be maintained as well to ensure the compatibility of the massing and the height of the building. The proposed building massing will comply with the W2 bylaw, and in my professional opinion, the site-specific zoning bylaw amendment provision removing the angular plane is consistent with the PPS, does conform with the official plan, complies with the intent of the bylaw, and makes for sound planning. I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. I will turn it over to Ms. Brisick for additional comments from administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just going to be sharing my screen here, just a moment. All right. So I've prepared just a very small slide presentation to explain the angular plane provision in a little bit more detail. So the concept of the angular plane is still fairly new, both to us in the planning department and to council. It's been introduced into our zoning bylaw in 2018. And on the screen, I've created a little diagram, if you will, to help explain what our current regulation requires. So you'll see we have the single residential dwelling under the low density side of the screen and apartment building, if you will, under the medium and high density right-hand side of the screen. The green dashed line depicts the approximate maximum height permitted within the low residential zones. The blue line depicts, for example, an interior lot line between two properties, and the angular plane provision is plugged in there in the red dashed line. As you can see, it begins at the ground level and projects upwards at a 45-degree angle. So the intention mainly for angular plane provisions is, of course, to reduce shadow effects from higher density development that is abutting the low density existing development, if you will. Since in the past little bit, we've had a number of inquiries requesting a reduction or removal of this angular plane. And in the planning department, we've evaluated it and we see kind of where it makes sense. And that's kind of caused us to start thinking about our current regulation, how it's best applied, and it led us to do some exploration of what other municipalities, how they apply it. So with that, I'll go to my next slide here. So as I mentioned, we've researched what other municipalities have in their zoning bylaw for regulations for angular plane. And as you can see here, the angular angular plane line doesn't begin at ground level. Instead, it begins at the maximum height, which were low density, the maximum height permitted for low density development, and projects upwards at that 45-degree angle. We've identified area for improvement as a result of the requests we've received for removal or reduction of the angular plane and the impacts it's having on the development. And we plan on remedying this situation in the future by bringing forth a housekeeping amendment to council. And so I just wanted to inform you of the research we've done and the information we've collected to date, and the reason why we would be in support of such an application as you see tonight. And I'm available for any questions that council may have.
Okay. We now will ask for any public comments. And if you have some comments, if you want to come forward. It's already on.
You already turned me on, okay. Doug Drillard, 130 Vermont, so the abutting property. Now I understand a little bit more what this meeting is all about, as far as angular plane, seeing your diagrams and everything like that. So really, it's just the provision for the fourth unit to be able to be, because it's not within that angular plane. Because I had a whole ton of questions, so I don't know if this is the right meeting to ask those questions or not. So I could submit them and they could be perused by everybody, and I've already given copies to the contractor and that. But,
I would suggest asking him at this meeting.
okay, so the first question is whether or not these units have any plans of being duplexed. We're talking about 8 families moving in. It could potentially be 16 if that possibility is there. So that could create some problems as far as traffic, parking, all that kind of thing. I looked into your bylaws, so my next question would be already answered because they're within the 1.2 meter setback from my property. I'll submit these so you see them, but there's a power transformer that's out in front of, like, right between the 2 properties that actually provides power to my neighbor across the street, myself, and 140 Vermont. So we're not sure how that would be handled, and the streetlights that are on those poles as well, how would that be handled? Then I'm understanding that it's the 2 units, so we're wondering if there's going to be plans for a French drain or anything put between properties. My house has been there for 40 years with never a water issue, so I was wondering if they're going to be regrading the property to bring it up a bit, because it is much lower than parts of my property are. So if there's plans for the regrading, if something like a French drain would be put in between the properties to address water. And the contractor's already answered that earlier. We never got to meet before today, so. The next question, I saw the shadow studies and everything, and I guess that addresses what the meeting was for today. But the other questions we have in the neighborhood are traffic studies. There's going to be potentially probably 2 vehicles in each one of the households if there's, a few people driving. So is there going to be enough parking for them? Street parking probably wouldn't be adequate there because of the quick turn off of Front Road. A lot of people, you're watching oncoming traffic and hitting Vermont quickly. So is that a plan that the parking would be allowed on the street? And angular views for Vermont to Front Road, how far back from Front Road would the 1 unit be? So when you approach the stop sign, will it obstruct any of the view when you're looking left to pull out on the Front Road? Because it is a pretty high traffic area. Current stormwater on the street. A lot of the street is closed off as far as people have closed off their ditches. But in front of part of my property and the property in question, it's all an open ditch. And I've seen over the years how much it fills up with water, and I imagine it'll be closed now that they're gonna have to put in driveways. So the question would be how that's gonna be addressed. Would they be connecting to my culvert as well to close off the entire ditch? And what kind of cleanouts would be put in? Because if you look down the entire street from Front Road and the open ditch at my house to Meloche Street, there's only one cleanout, and that's at 140 Vermont. So I don't know if people have closed off their ditches legally, but to address like water issues that way, how is that gonna be answered? Would a proper curbing be put in with proper sewer drains or whatever with this kind of a development? And then they already answered me. I was asking if balconies were being proposed at the house because that would change some of the privacy issues and that. Pretty much that's about it as far as my questions. I'll submit what I have, but the contractor's already answered a few of them prior to the meeting. But those are the ones that I think are the biggest concerns for the neighborhood is water and power.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Administration, are you able to address any of those questions at this time?
Thank you, Your Worship. I can address some of the planning-related ones, if you will. For the question on the duplex question here, I think he's referring to additional residential units. They are permitted as of right, as we know. However, the developer would need to accommodate the parking requirements for an ARU, and at this time, I'm not sure if there is the space available. Street townhouses do require 2 parking spaces per unit. There is a garage space. I'm not sure at this time the space available for on the driveway in addition to an additional vehicle, and an ARU does require at least 1 parking space. So unsure at this time. Regarding parking studies, I think Curtis here to my left can assure me that parking study was not triggered as a result of the number of units proposed here. As mentioned earlier, the applicant intends to maintain all other setbacks and requirements of the W2 zone, so no further relief is being requested. As far as the details of the design, the balconies, the power lines, things of that sort, normally that gets sorted out more at the building department stage, or building permit stage. At this time, I believe the applicants haven't yet completed their design of the townhouse units. They were hoping to get over this approval first and then put their time into the design. Thank you.
Sorry, just to add to Ms. Brissick's comments, we're happy to issue a formal letter back to the delegate that responds to each individual question that he's asked in collaboration with the proponent, or alternatively, if it's council's preference, we can come back to council with a report that outlines how we've addressed each of the questions that we hear tonight and any council considerations if they want to pursue the second recommendation in the report.
I will wait to see what council has to say. Mr. Bartley, did you have something to add?
Through you, Mayor Meloche. The only one I wanted to add right now at this point is the questions regarding stormwater. So for this site, as with all sites, the on-site storage will be required to, the entire property will be required to be graded so that no water spills onto neighboring properties. They will retain their entire water and outlet to, as of now, it's to the ditch that's in front, but as you mentioned, that ditch will be enclosed. There is plans for a 750 storm sewer down Vermont that will be installed likely as part of this, but as part of our Front Road storm sewer project, which is a separate project that we're working on now. So we would be putting the storm sewer into the limits of this property and then closing in that ditch on the south side and installing some catch basins to connect there, which would eliminate that open ditch and provide an outlet for those storm sewer connections.
Thank you. Can you just clarify, is the ditch being closed in front of both parcels?
It would be enclosed to the connection to where it is enclosed now. So yes, it's about maybe a quarter of the way across the property at 130 now.
Thank you very much. Members of council, questions or comments regarding the application? Councilor Reno?
Thank you, Your Worship. Excuse me, my question is concerning something that was stated by the planner. So you can just answer from where you are, that's fine. I seem to have heard, we've been talking about parking and you know what can happen with this lot. Did I hear that there would be 2 parking spots per and an additional 2 parking spots opened up at some point? Did I hear that correctly, or is the parking that's going to be in these small driveways going to be the only parking that will be on site?
Musical chairs, thank you. Basically, they haven't finished the design work of the townhouse units. They're proposing at this point garage parking space, and then they're proposing each one driveway parking space. So there's going to, I misspoke earlier, I meant to say that there's going to be 2 per unit, yeah. No,
The
no
reason I
additional.
ask is just in regards to the homeowner
Yep.
being concerned about duplexing and thing, and the comment coming back with only 2 per, they can't duplex. So I think that gives a little relief to the neighboring property as to what can happen down the road even when things change hands down the road. So thank you for your comment, and that takes a little bit off my mind.
Good.
Councilor Burns?
I have a couple of questions. First, are these townhouses going to be rentals or for sale?
We're going to be going through consent process to create them as separate units. They'll be for sale.
Thank you. The next concern I have is, again, as Mr. Drouillard stated, is what is the distance from Vermont? So as I'm looking west, when I go to look south or north, how far are these back away from Front Road? Is it
We
3
don't-
meters, 2 meters? I like feet, but
We don't have that exact number at this point, simply because we don't have the final design of the building, but it's intended that the front face of the buildings fronting on Vermont will be set back at 6 meters. And I believe Mr. Drouillard's house is set a little closer to the street, so it won't have an impact on his view.
And my final question would be, how big are the backyards going to be? Is it going to be communal backyards? Is there going to be a fence for each separate piece of property?
What will happen is the consent applications will break it into 2 parcels, and then each of those will be broken into individual lots. So they will have privacy fences that will separate them, and they will own to the back lot line, own to the front lot line, very similar to a single detached.
Yep.
But this is going to be a single attached. You're welcome.
Councilor Riccio Spagnuolo?
Thank you, through you. There was a discussion about perhaps there will be balconies
No.
put in? There will not be balconies, okay.
No.
I was just gonna ask what,
Quite likely not. As a single attached unit, you don't tend to have balconies.
I just wanted to make sure there was
Yeah.
something in place for privacy.
Oh,
for-
absolutely.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Is there anyone else here who would like to speak on this? No? Okay. The parking thing was cleared up because I had the same question regarding the parking. And my question is, if we did not approve this, what does that mean for the development? That they can't do the 3 and 3, right?
4 and
4
4.
and 4?
Yep.
That'd be 3 and 3 instead? Is that what would, is that
Or-
what, I'm not understanding how it would negatively impact.
Your worship, it would become a block of 4 and a block of 3.
Thank you, and I realize this question's probably more for the meeting when we actually do discuss this, but I feel like I would need to ask it anyways, is who decides where that angular plane should start? We do it from ground, where you showed a slide where it was at the maximum height. Is that something that's each municipality can determine.
So through you, Madam Mayor, when the comprehensive zoning bylaw was developed, I wasn't here myself, but my understanding is that it is up to the municipality to decide. Since that time, we've done a bit of a cursory review on how other municipalities apply the angular plane provision. Some calculate it and apply it at ground level, and others calculate it and apply it at the maximum height that's restricted in the zoning. So it really differs depending on the jurisdiction. But I think, as Christina has highlighted, we've really identified this as a bit of a shortcoming in our bylaw. And so when we go back sort of annually and look at different opportunities for improvement in the zoning bylaw, this is one that we have flagged because it's really not working if we measure it at ground level. It's not making sense. So what we would like to do is alter the provision so that it maintains the integrity of what the angular plan is supposed to do, which is to protect against shadows and compatible land uses, but also that it makes a bit more sense. And to Ms. Laslene's point, it doesn't really make sense in this particular instance.
Thank you very much. Councillor Reno, did you have a question?
Just a follow-up question, again, with, the future uses of this building. Is it fair to say that if we were to deny this request and they were to go down to 3 and 4, that would then open up a parking spot, a parking lot, that would then enable them to duplex in the future? So by turning this down, we could end up causing more of a problem down the road for the neighbor. Can you comment on that at all?
Through you, Mayor Malash, it really comes down to the way that they may design that last parcel. They may wish to fill in that parcel and make a larger unit. May not necessarily result in an additional residential unit, as you've mentioned. That's hard to answer that question without having a design before us.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Worship. Through you to either of our planners. When this first came to me, I Googled angular plane like I Google everything, and I found the comments that the province had put on under Bill 185 about angular planes. Just to make sure that I understand everything correctly, what I read was that the province is saying that this angular plane theory is detrimental in certain municipalities as it comes to building more homes. I just want to make sure that what I've read is what I understand. So if a member of administration can just make sure I'm on the right track.
So I think it's a balance, right? I think we need to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to increase housing supply and housing options in the community, but also balancing that with compatibility restrictions, whether it be shadows, step backs, heights. So it really is finding that appropriate balance and making sure that we remain flexible. And I think this is one example of our flexibility. We are, entertaining this request because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense in this instance. And this is an opportunity for us to get some additional housing stock in the community. So I think, while the comment that perhaps you read is accurate, I think finding that right balance is that particular sweet spot.
Thank you, Worship. Like I said, there's a number of comments on the Government of Ontario website, and they both gone different directions based on the municipality. So a GTA person was saying the shadow would make it unpalatable, while someone in Guelph would say, along with what I just heard from our administration. So you've answered my question. Thank you very much.
Yes, go ahead.
If I could just add to that, exactly what the planners have been talking about. In different municipalities, they will sometime implement an angular plane for shadow, for massing, for just built form. What you want to encourage is the single detached, the semi-detached, the townhouse units by right. You've got a wonderful bylaw that's molded to deal with that. It has a lot coverage, it has a height, it's got everything that's going to control where that building's going to go, how high it can be, and compatible with the neighborhood. The shadow issue, the massing issue, the height issue becomes multi-residential. in nature. And Goodwin is speaking about the bylaw at the moment doesn't support those multiple single attached or single detached units, and puts the bylaw puts that property then in somewhat of jeopardy, and they will be constantly coming to council saying the semi-detached doesn't fit, it doesn't meet the angular plane. But the intent of the bylaw is to allow by right those single, those semi, the townhouses, and then you're trying to eliminate the bureaucracy, basically. But what you want to maintain as a belt and suspenders is that angular plane, so that when you do get the 6 stories, the 8 stories, that you're not having that negative impact. And it's basically used in place of urban design guidelines that the larger cities use, that doesn't make sense either in a small municipality. So it's a great tool, but used at this moment just in the wrong place.
Thank you very much. If there's no other questions or comments, there are 2 recommendations in front of you. The first one, it says if issues arise at the public planning meeting that are not immediately resolved, a summary of issues along with a final recommendation on the application will follow by way of a future planning reports to council. Or if all issues are resolved at the public planning meeting, the requisite zoning bylaw amendment will be brought forward for council's consideration at a subsequent council meeting. So there's 2 in front of you. What's council's pleasure this evening? Councilor Reno?
Am I able to ask one more question of Mr. Drouillard? Mr. Drouillard, you are the most affected by this project. You did come with a barrage of questions that, as you were reading them out, you said, I think this one's done, I think we're done with this. Now, administration has offered to answer any additional questions and bring them back in a report that is just going to add time to the timeline here. Do you feel that your questions have been answered adequately tonight, or do you feel that we should be looking for more answers before we move this forward?
Well, I certainly understand now what the meeting was about as far as angular plane and having that 4th unit, you know, not really understanding that 45-degree and everything else. I think the other questions would be for a meeting down the road where it's actually the part where they're developing the property. So as far as the angular plane, I don't personally have an objection to that. Like, I would hate for them to have to lose like 300, 400,000 for 1 unit or whatever it's going to be. And it's not much of a difference as far as that angular plane from the lot line, I feel. So I would hate to object to the project based off of that, but there are just those other questions I would say maybe in a future meeting could be addressed. I don't know if that would hold this back, those questions.
In particular, your question would be about drainage. Is that your biggest concern?
Drainage, power, sight lines, as far as like, I think the sight line when Councillor Burns brought up about, I'm not worried about my property sight line. I'm more worried about when you approach Front Road and you're looking left to merge on the Front Road, how close they would be to front. And we talked about that beforehand, and I think that's all being addressed. So, as far as the angular plane, that question's answered, and I don't foresee an issue with that myself.
Okay. Thank you.
So, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Beggs?
Sorry, just for council's benefit, we're happy to meet with Mr. Drouillard and go through his concerns individually. We did receive this letter just now, so staff would be happy to meet with him and go through his concerns one by one if that helps at all.
Okay, council's pleasure. There's 2 options. Councilor Reno?
I'd make the the motion that we move forward with accepting this proposal, and that that it goes to a bylaw at the next meeting.
Moved by Councilor Reno, support. Councilor Burns, all in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much for joining us today. And meeting's adjourned.